At my son's law school reception, I was directed to the kitchen. "Catering staff this way," a man hissed. I could have flashed my federal judge credentials. But when his girlfriend's father said, "Keep that cleaning lady away," I let them learn the hard way. Showing my cards too early is a tactical error I never make. I adjusted my navy suit jacket, feeling the weight of my badge in my purse. The heavy oak doors of the club seemed to loom over me like a silent jury. The floor manager shoved a stark white apron into my chest without looking up. He checked his watch with a frantic, sweating hand. "Tray service starts in 5 minutes," he barked, pointing toward the swinging silver doors. I took the fabric, the starch rasping against my skin. My son, Ethan, was somewhere in that sea of tuxedos and silk. He expected his mother. The judge, instead, the elite, saw a prop. I tied the strings tight around my waist, my smile turning cold and sharp. I stepped into the ballroom. A ghost in a white uniform. The air smelled of expensive scotch and old money arrogance. It was a psychological phenomenon I had studied for years from the bench. By making myself subservient, I became entirely invisible to the room. The guests didn't see a person. They saw a furniture piece that served champagne. I moved through the crowd with a silver tray balanced on one hand. Across the room, I locked eyes with Ethan. His face went pale. Ethan took a step forward, his mouth opening to shout for me. I gave him the look. It was the same microscopic shake of the head I used for a bailiff during a defendant's outburst. "Stand down," my eyes commanded. "Let this happen." Ethan hesitated, then slowly retreated into the shadow of a marble pillar. He realized his mother wasn't just a parent tonight. I was a predator entering high grass, and for the first time, he saw me as a strategist. I turned my attention to Sterling Thorne, who was laughing nearby. Sterling held court near the orchestra, gesturing wildly with a glass of dark amber liquid. His daughter, Madison, stood beside him. She wore a dress that cost more than a teacher's yearly salary. She snapped her fingers at a passing busboy to take her empty glass. There was no thank you or acknowledgement of his existence. "These people are lucky we are even considering this merger," Sterling laughed. His voice carried over the music, thick with unearned pride. He felt like the king. I drifted closer, refilling a glass near Sterling's elbow. "More scotch, sir?" I asked in a flat, uneducated tone. I stripped the authority from my voice, leaving it hollow. Sterling didn't even look at my face as he waved a dismissive hand. "Keep it coming, and try not to spill on the Italian leather," he muttered. I walked away, the adrenaline settling into a cold knot. They thought I was serving drinks. In reality, I was serving them a rope to hang themselves. I moved through the service corridor's heavy silence. It smelled of industrial soap and stale coffee grounds. My knuckles ached with a familiar phantom pain. 30 years ago, I didn't wear a judge's robe. I wore a gray jumpsuit and pushed a heavy mop across marble floors. I learned the law by cleaning up after the people who practiced it. Sterling Thorne saw a failure of ambition in my apron. I saw the hunger that built my entire empire. I closed my eyes, running the numbers in my head. Ethan never knew the full cost of his education. He didn't know I liquidated my retirement to keep him in a top-tier school district. I had been the silent investor in his life, compounding interest on his integrity. The Thornes were merely late investors. They arrived when the stock was high, trying to buy a company they didn't build. A young busboy brushed past me, looking at the floor. "Chin up," I whispered, my voice dropping into my judicial tone. "You are the only reason this party is functioning." He looked up, startled by the authority in my eyes. I straightened my apron strings. The nostalgia phase was over. I knew exactly what my son was walking into tonight. It was time to return to the lion's den. I pushed the double doors open, letting the party's noise wash over me. I wasn't just serving drinks now. I was collecting receipts. The ballroom was louder now, as alcohol stripped away social polish. I tracked the gravitational pull of the Thorne family ego. They stood near the floor, tit-ceiling windows, posing for cameras. Madison radiated a brittle, blinding charisma. She was flanked by bridesmaids who looked like accessories. I watched a young server named Sophia approach the circle. She held a silver tray of crab cakes, her hands trembling. She waited for a break in the conversation, polite and deferred. "Hors d'oeuvre, Miss Thorne?" Sophia asked softly. Madison spun around, her face twisting in a flash of irritation. It was so fast and ugly it was impressive. God. No. Madison snapped, recoiling as if the food were toxic. I told the coordinator no shellfish near the bridal party. Are you trying to kill me or just incompetent? Sophia paled, her grip on the silver tray slipping. The music seemed to stop in my ears as the girl began to shake. I am so sorry. I didn't know. Sophia stammered. Madison cut her off with a sharp edge of practiced disdain. Go away before you ruin my dress. Sophia turned to leave. But she bumped a high, top table in her haste. A single flute of champagne tipped, splashing a few drops onto the marble. You would have thought a bomb had gone off. Sterling roared, stepping in. He didn't check on the girl. He just laughed a cruel, barking sound. You see this, Ethan? Sterling asked. This is why we pay for the VIP package. Good help is extinct. Ethan looked sick. He started to step forward, but Madison put a hand on his chest. She claimed him and silenced him. That was the moment I stepped forward. I didn't look at Sterling. I knelt on the cold floor next to Sophia. It is just water and grapes, I whispered. From my knees, I saw Madison sneering down. I wiped the floor with slow, deliberate strokes. Sophia looked at me with terrified eyes, her breath hitching in her chest. I am going to get fired, she whispered. I didn't look up, but my voice was a velvet anchor. You won't, I promised. I guarantee it. I stood up and caught Madison's eye. She looked unsettled for a fleeting second. Maybe she saw the judge behind the servant. Then, she huffed and turned her back on me. I traded the tray for a bottle of vintage Dominion. I moved toward the corner table, where the air felt thinner and colder. This was the inner sanctum of the firm. Sterling Thorne leaned in close to his senior partners, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr. He was swirling a glass of expensive scotch. The Meridian antitrust merger is a done deal, he said. My hand remained steady. I filled a glass for a partner I recognized from a website bio. The Department of Justice is watching us, the partner whispered. He looked nervous. His eyes darting toward the ballroom. The case just got assigned to Judge Vance in the Second Circuit. I heard she is meticulous. I didn't spill a single drop of the sparkling liquid. I waited in the shadows. Sterling laughed. A sound like dry leaves crunching under a heavy boot. Lydia Vance. Please. She is a diversity hire with a bleeding heart. She cares about feelings. The partner pressed him on the environmental impact reports. If Vance sees the toxicity levels in the water data, she will block the merger. It was a clear violation of the Clean Water Act. I felt a cold thrill race down my spine. Sterling took a long, slow sip of his drink. She won't see them, he said. The small circle of men went quiet. We aren't going to shred them. Someone asked in a frantic, low hiss. We aren't amateurs, Sterling scoffed. We are going to bury them. He explained the plan with a sickening grin. They had dumped the toxicity reports into the middle of the discovery handover. Box 4000, right between the cafeteria receipts and the parking validation logs. He believed a federal judge wouldn't have the brain power to dig through 2 million pages. He had just admitted to a conspiracy to defraud the court in front of me, with steamroll her, Sterling concluded, raising his glass high. We use big words and we walk out with $40 billion. The men toasted to the Meridian merger with a synchronized chorus. I adjusted the towel over my arm. In my head, I wasn't serving drinks. I was already drafting a bench warrant. More champagne, gentlemen, I asked. My voice remained invisible. Keep it coming, sweetheart, Sterling said, turning his back to me yet again. I walked away, the glass bottle heavy in my hand. He thought he was burying the evidence. He didn't realize he was burying himself. But Sterling wasn't done feasting on his own arrogance. He draped an arm around the senior partner's shoulder. He shifted the topic from federal crimes to his daughter's triumphs. Madison just secured the summer associate position at the Solicitor General's office. He beamed. My blood ran cold. I sat on that oversight committee. The partner raised a skeptical eyebrow at Sterling. That program accepts 3 applicants a year. It is reserved for the top tier of the Ivy League. Sterling chuckled, a low and oily sound. The committee suddenly remembered how much they enjoy the new reading room I funded. They had to make some administrative adjustments. My grip tightened on the bottle. I knew that selection process was supposed to be blind. It was based entirely on individual merit and grit. There was some girl, Sterling continued, waving a hand. I nobody from a state school with a perfect LS8 score. A real striver, but she didn't have the pedigree. We couldn't let a slot like that go to waste on someone without connections. Her application simply got misplaced. My blood turned to ice in my veins. It wasn't just nepotism now. It was theft. I looked toward the service entrance. Sophia was sitting on a plastic milk crate. Sophia had a thick book open on her lap. I squinted through the dim light of the hallway. It was an LSAT prep guide. The pages were dog-eared and filled with notes in cheap blue ink. The pieces clicked together with the terrifying precision of a closing argument. Sophia was the nobody Sterling was talking about. She was the girl who studied until her eyes burned. She worked double shifts only to have her future stolen by a parasite. This wasn't just a social slight anymore. This was the grand larceny of a human life. I looked back at Sterling, who was laughing with his peers. He fed on the dreams of people like Sophia to fatten his own offspring. I set the champagne bottle down on a side table with a deliberate thud. The sound felt final. The discovery phase was over. I had the motive, I had the method, I even had the verbal confession. I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady as I scrolled. I opened a contact named Senator Reynolds. He was the keynote speaker for the event, and my oldest friend from law school. 2 short sentences. Code blue in the kitchen. I need a witness. I hit send without hesitation. I wasn't just the mother of the groom anymore. I was a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. The kitchen doors swung open with a heavy, rhythmic thud. Senator William Reynolds stood in the frame, flanked by 2 security agents. He was a man whose face appeared on every news channel in the country. Sterling Thorne's face lit up with greed. He smoothed his tuxedo jacket and stepped forward with an extended hand. He was ready to claim a connection to power. Reynolds walked right past him. He didn't even blink at the managing partner. The senator walked straight to the service station where I stood. I was still holding a dirty rag. Lydia? Reynolds asked, his voice booming in the sudden quiet of the ballroom. Judge Vance, why on earth are you wearing an apron? The silence that followed was absolute. It was the vacuum that happens right after a bomb detonates. Sterling's hand remained frozen in the air. He looked at me, then at the senator. His face turned ashen. Sterling's hand hovered in the empty air, a useless claw. Madison whispered my title like a curse, her champagne glass tilting dangerously toward her silk dress. I reached behind my back and untied the knot of the apron. I pulled the white fabric over my head with steady, slow motions. I folded it neatly and placed it on a silver tray. I smoothed the lapels of my suit. The cleaning lady was gone. The Honorable Lydia Vance had arrived. Actually, Miss Thorne, I am a judge on the Second Circuit, I said. My voice projected to the back of the room without effort. And I have heard quite enough tonight to question the integrity of your father's $40 billion merger. Sterling made a choking sound, his face a map of sudden terror. Judge Vance, we had no idea. He stammered. It was just a misunderstanding. We were joking about the staff. I stepped into his personal space, watching him shrink away from me. Was it a joke when you admitted to a conspiracy? I asked. My voice remained cold and clinical. You detailed your plan to bury toxicity reports in box 4000. The blood left his lips completely. That is privileged conversation. He wheezed, his eyes darting toward the senator. Not when you shouted at a server in a crowded ballroom. I countered. There is no attorney-client privilege in the catering line, Mr. Thorne. I looked at Senator Reynolds. The senator crossed his arms and glared at the trembling man. I can explain, Sterling whispered, but the words carried no weight. You will explain at your disbarment hearing. I promised. I turned my gaze to Madison. She looked small now, her expensive armor of silk and diamonds having dissolved. She was just a child playing dress-up. A's for the internship. I sit on that oversight committee. We take academic integrity very seriously, I said, watching her flinch. I will be personally pulling your file tomorrow morning, I continued. I am interested to see how an application was misplaced for you. Madison grabbed her mother's arm. But her mother was staring at the floor. They wanted to dissolve into the carpet. Ethan, I said, turning to my son. He stepped out from the shadows near the pillar. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked relieved. He walked over and stood firmly by my side. Ready to go, Mom? Ethan asked. I nodded, but I had one final task. I turned back to Sterling. He was shaking visibly now, his world collapsing in real time. You were right about one thing, Mr. Thorne. You should be careful who you talk to. I looked at the senator, then back at Sterling. You never know when the cleaning lady holds the gavel. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. The silence held until the heavy oak doors swung shut behind us. I didn't stay for the cake. By the time the staff served dessert, I was already in a cab. My heels were kicked off as I drafted an affidavit on my phone. The fallout was swift and absolute. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a complete implosion of a legacy. Sterling Thorne didn't just lose the case. He lost his firm. Justice was finally finding its way. Time moved forward, the gears of the court grinding fine. A few days later, the heavy courthouse elevator descended with a smooth, mechanical hum that vibrated through my heels. Ethan stood beside me, his reflection caught in the polished brass panels of the doors. We emerged into the grand lobby where the public and the powerful collided. A group of junior associates scurried past, clutching thick binders and frantic energy. They didn't recognize me without my black robe or the white apron. I was just another woman in a navy suit. I felt a sudden, sharp clarity in the anonymity. We stepped onto the sidewalk where the city's heat rose in shimmering waves from the pavement. The noise of Manhattan was a symphony of chaos that grounded me instantly. A yellow taxi screeched to a halt at the corner, its driver shouting into a headset. I watched a woman in a stained uniform, scrubbing the windows of a nearby cafe. She worked with a rhythmic, tireless precision that I remembered in my own bones. She didn't look up as we walked past her. I need to stop by the clerk's office, I told Ethan, checking my watch. The afternoon sun was blinding against the glass towers. I have to file the final sanctions against Thorne and partners. My son nodded, his eyes following a passing delivery truck. He was adjusting to a world without the Thorne shadow looming over his career. It was a strange, quiet transition for him. He was no longer the golden boy of a corrupt dynasty. He was finally just himself. Inside the clerk's office, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and toner. A line of exhausted paralegals stretched toward the counter, their eyes fixed on their phones. I waited my turn like everyone else in the building. There was no judicial priority here at the filing window. I felt the old itch of impatience, but I suppressed it. This was the ritual of justice. Every page had to be stamped. Every lie had to be officially documented. I reached the front of the line and handed over the blue folder. The clerk was a middle-aged man with thick glasses and a bored expression. He didn't look at my face as he began to stamp the documents. The rhythmic thud of the rubber stamp sounded like a gavel hitting a block. It was the final nail in Sterling Thorne's professional coffin. The clerk paused when he reached the final signature page. He looked up, his eyes widening behind the lenses. "Judge Vance?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly in the quiet room. I gave him a small, tight nod. "I didn't realize you did your own filings." "Your Honor." I leaned against the cold metal counter, feeling the weight of the moment. "Sometimes you have to see the process through to the very end," I replied. He finished the task with a new sense of urgency. He handed back the stamped copies with a hand that trembled just a little. We walked back out into the light. The mission officially completed. The legal system had moved its heavy gears, and the truth was now a matter of public record. But as we reached the corner, a black town car pulled up to the curb. The tinted window slid down, revealing the pale, gaunt face of Sterling Thorne. He looked like a ghost of the man I had confronted at the gala. The arrogance had been replaced by a hollow, desperate rage. "You think you won, Lydia?" Sterling rasped, his voice barely audible over the traffic. His hands were white, knuckled on the leather armrest of the car. "You destroyed a legacy for a girl who serves crab cakes." I stopped walking and looked him directly in the eye. I didn't feel anger, only a profound sense of pity for his smallness. "I protected a legacy of merit," I said. "Something you wouldn't understand." He stared at me for a long, silent second. The window slid back up, and the car pulled away into the flow of traffic. It was a pathetic exit for a man who once moved markets with a whisper. Ethan put a hand on my shoulder, sensing the tension in my posture. "He's gone, Mom?" he said softly. I watched the car disappear around the corner of the building. But I knew men like Sterling didn't just vanish. They shifted and regrouped in the darker corners of power. I turned away from the street and started walking toward the subway entrance. The elite might drive in town cars, but the truth lives in the tunnels below. I felt the weight of my badge in my purse, a constant reminder of my oath. My heels clicked on the stairs as we descended into the earth. The trial was over. But the surveillance of the world never stopped. I was still watching, and I was still ready to serve the law. The subway platform was a subterranean stage of flickering lights and humid air. I stood near the edge, the yellow safety line a boundary between two worlds. Ethan stayed close, his eyes scanning the dark tunnel for the incoming train. The screech of steel against steel echoed in the distance, a primal scream of the city. I felt the lie of status finally dissolve within me. I was not defined by the robe or the apron. I was simply the truth. A heavy wind preceded the train, carrying the scent of ozone and ancient dust. The silver cars slid to a halt, their doors opening with a weary sigh. We stepped inside and found seats on the orange plastic bench. An old man sat across from us, his hands gnarled from years of manual labor. He wore a faded security uniform that reminded me of my own source code. He didn't know a federal judge was sitting 3 feet away. We were just commuters. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. The woman staring back was no longer hiding behind a title. I realized that my need for recognition had been a ghost from my past. The wound of being dismissed as a diversity hire had finally scabbed over. I didn't need Sterling Thorne to see me. I only needed to see the people who were truly doing the work. The train jolted forward, pulling us deeper into the city's heart. Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand, a silent gesture of gratitude. He had chosen integrity over a comfortable lie. That was the interest on the investment I had made in his character. The Thornes were a toxic merger he had successfully avoided. We were a family built on the marble of hard work, not the sand of connections. I felt a sense of peace settle over my shoulders. The trial of our lives was officially over and done. As we reached our stop, I noticed a small flyer taped to the subway door. It was an advertisement for a local law clinic for the underserved. The paper was peeling at the corners, but the message was clear. Justice for all, not just for the few. I pulled a pen from my purse and wrote a name on the back of my business card. I handed it to a young woman sitting nearby who was reading a textbook. "Call them," I said. We climbed the stairs back to the surface where the evening air was cool. My home was just a few blocks away, a sanctuary of quiet and books. I thought about the apron in my closet and the gavel on my desk. They were the same weight now. I looked at the stars struggling to shine against the city glow. I was a judge, a mother, and a servant of the truth. But as I reached for my keys, I felt a new shadow, not of a predator, but of a woman finally standing in the full light of her own making.